Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the weekly radio show to help you recognise and unlock the entrepreneur skills in your business. In this week's episode, we go a bit deeper into some psychology around introversion as I interview psychological coach Navjeet Grewal about some of the things and some of the links between confidence and introversion. Being an introvert does not mean that you're not confident, but sometimes it can make one feel like that. And Navjeet has some tips for the introvert and one for the non-introverted leader. But first, it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Introverts can fix themselves and become extroverts. Sorry, don't agree. As an introvert, you may learn to adopt extroverted behaviours. You may even become good at them. That doesn't make you an extrovert. You're still more likely to be more sensitive to spending time with people, even though you might get more tolerant. But actually, why would you want to fix yourself and become an extrovert? Other than the fact that society seems to reward extroverts. Researchers at the Gifted Development Center in America have found that about 60% of gifted children are introverted, compared with 30% of the general population. Introversion correlates with introspection, reflection, the ability to inhibit aggression, deep sensitivity, moral development, high academic achievement, scholarly contributions, leadership in academic fields in adult life, and perhaps a smoother passage through midlife. However, it's very likely to be misunderstood and corrected in children by well-meaning adults. Sounds good, huh? Doesn't mean that all introverts are gifted, I'm afraid. Have you ever heard about the natural superiority of males? It's a theory, or was a theory, which said men were more intelligent than women. Some people said that as there were more men with high IQs than women, it proved it. The trouble is, more males are tested. From 1979 to 1989, 57% of the children taken to that centre for testing were male and 43% female. In 2008, it got even worse. Parents were more likely to take male children. 68% of the children brought for testing were male and only 32% female. But, by the way, the highest IQ score on record at the centre was attained by a girl, and 4 of the 5 highest scores were earned by girls. So, not only have we burst the introvert fixing myth, we've broken the gender intelligence myth. I just know I'm going to be in trouble for this one. I think it could be a good time to return to the topic and talk to Navjeet Grewal about confidence and introversion. Do let me know what introvert myth you'd like exposed, or what tip you'd like that would help you to activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business. I'd also love to hear your feedback about this series on the Apple iTunes Store or podchaser.com. Please take a moment after the show. And finally, if you'd like to talk to me about speaking at your conference, virtual or face-to-face, or working with your team, I'd love to hear from you. But now, let's get on with this week's interview. Welcome, Navjeet.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Just before we get into this discussion around some of the ways you've seen introverts and extroverts and that kind of border play with each other and each other's performance, question I ask all of my guests is, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Yes, I would call myself an introvert, actually, because...
What does being an introvert mean to you? Pluses and minuses, perhaps?
I mean, for me, I have, really enjoyed being an introvert, actually, because it gives me so much of space and time to think. I'm a very reflective and an introspective person. So using, especially because I enjoy observing people and psychologically analyzing their behavior. And being an introvert, it really helps me and gives me the time and space to think and connect various behaviors and links and the knowledge I've gained and the information I acquire from my experience and my practice.
Okay, so really interesting. Again, this thing about introverts being reflective. Introverts quite often are analytical. It's not in itself a definition. Obviously, there are reflective and analytical extroverts, but but very often introverts are like that. Now, we were discussing earlier how introverts often process inputs in a group setting and how that can go on to affect the way that introverts are performance and how they act.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so as we were discussing, so I've had a few clients, who are introverts, and sometimes like being in a group at work, especially full of extroverts around them, it really inhibits their performance basically, and it can really dampen their confidence at times. So the usual, they come up with is problems they come up with is that there are these people around them who are, who will take any opportunity to come forward and do things. And these clients like really get annoyed or sort of get like very bad at performing themselves, so they have these performance issues just because they feel threatened by these people around them.
So that's rather interesting then, because as you say, it's certainly not uncommon, and many introverts I work with find that they don't like those, shall we call it, a noisy setting, perhaps lots of extroverts around them. And that's one of the reasons I suspect why lots of people think that being an introvert is a bit like having not a lot of confidence. The two are not the same at all, but I can certainly understand why one thing can lead to another. In the same way as if you've been bitten by a dog, you might lack confidence when around dogs.
Exactly. Yeah.
What is it, do you think, that being surrounded by extroverts who are talking a lot actually does in a psychological sense?
So what happens is in introverts, it's a fact that the way their brain works is how they process it. It's the stimulus, they're taking it, it's coming from inside more rather than from outside, whereas for extroverts are getting more and more stimulation from outside, and they really like it that way. And that's how they just join in, and more they interact and more they get the response, they get more stimulated. Whereas an introvert is basically needs the time to process, to think within themselves, take the information. But they do like to come up with answers, or they do like to be appreciated within their work, but they take their own time to do that. And so I had a client she works with NHS. So she came to me, she was like, oh, I really, really, think I'm very, I really want to be very confident in the way I come across with my superiors, and I was like, while I was working with her, so it just came across that she just thinks all other people around her are too noisy. They come up with ideas so quickly, and she takes time, and the more they talk about it, she gets really threatened, and she just holds things back. And that's why she's losing all that confidence within herself.
So very much then, being an introvert, just because you're quiet when all this noise is around you, doesn't mean you don't have an answer. As you said, introverts tend to process things internally, so they tend to think it through, where an extrovert will process externally. Quite often, the very act of talking is how an extrovert works out their answer, which to introverts like you and me seems very strange indeed.
Yeah.
What then would you suggest a couple of tips to help confidence in situations like that for an introvert?
How I have sort of learned to process this, and how I sort of work with clients is, again, you're being introspective and being reflective is the greatest strength, So what you should do is take a breather and be mindful of what is going on within you, and that you are being, all this noise around you is really bothering you, and it's creating that fear inside you. So if you are being mindful of that, if you take a breather and make an excuse, go outside, have your own time, or even if you're just sitting in that setting, just take your time to think about things and pick up more important issues or more critical points where you can think and you can add on your valuable inputs or insight to this group, which other people might be just ignoring it, because they are so used to just putting their ideas across without even giving a deep thinking to it,
Yeah. Breathe, stop, be mindful, give yourself the opportunity to process the thinking, which I think is a really important one. The other one that I often say to people, and quite like your view on it, but is I find introverts, because they tend to be very good listeners, are also good at summarizing debates, shall we say. So the other way of getting some time would be to say, okay, guys, can I just stop you there for a second and summarize the main things we've been covering?
Definitely.
In doing so, first of all, they've added to the discussion. They've then brought themselves the time to remember, actually, I do know what I'm doing. I don't need to lose confidence. And it allows them to steer into another direction. So I think that's one works really nicely with breathing and being mindful.
Definitely.
So if I twist the question the other way around for a second, if you were a leader and you know, this was your meeting where there was a group of extroverts who were doing lots of talking and an introvert who was perhaps getting quieter than normal because the confidence was draining. As the leader in the room, what might you do to help the introvert, and why would you even bother?
If I'm a leader, then firstly, I would really like to have inputs from everybody in the room, because one thing which is very important for me is to give equal importance to everybody, all the teammates. And if I am very mindful of the fact that different people behave differently because of their different personality traits, So I will give them equal opportunity. And if some people are being noisy, so I would make it more of a conscious effort to help this person who's being more quiet, to give that person or the team member more chance to speak up, because he or she might have very, very valuable input to add to this, but this person might be just holding it back.
And very often, if we are processing internally, we're probably thinking things through in perhaps more depth than the external processors.
Exactly.
And therefore, we're likely to have a deeper view. Brilliant. And so that's a really good reason why, as a leader, you would want to ensure that all of your team is committing to the discussion. Thank you. Now, if some of the listeners wanted to get back in touch with you, Navjeet, how would they do that?
Email is navjeet@mindreorg.com.
And just spell that for us so that listeners can get that one.
So it's NAVJEET at mind, MINDREORG, mindreorg.com. And my website is www.mindreorg.com.
Thank you very, very much for being here today. It's been great to talk.
Thank you very much, John, for giving me this opportunity to talk. It was really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to see your reviews on the iTunes store. Thank you once again, and catch up with you next week.